About.
Mm.
Hey, thanks for doing this, Bob. This is a. I don't want to. I don't want to blow smoke up your ass, but this is a privilege. This is a total privilege. I'll tell you. So I'll tell you a bit of a background. So we started climbing in Ireland, right?
Right.
And you never meet people very much. And then went to Britain a bit, and you sort of read magazines and stuff, and you sort of cotton on to all these sort of names like Ben Moon and Jerry Muff and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Myself and Brian Callan and Paul Dunlop went one time to the south of France, to the Buttes, Verdun
Uh-huh.
type places.
Yeah, yeah.
We hooked up this little gang of guys called Gavin Ellis,
Oh, Gavin, yeah, yeah.
John Boyle,
Hmm.
Metty, who else? Rod the fireman,
Oh,
and
brilliant.
they all came from up your way. And they
Yes.
would always tell us these mad stories about the county. They tell us all these mad county stories, and me and Brian and Paul were just blown away by all these yarns because it wasn't the stuff we ever read about in magazines, but it sounded like
Hmm.
this whole little sort of mad thing happening up there with all you guys. You're all this little. It sounded like it was a little sort of uh, you imagine some sort of little independent country. So I'd never even heard of Northumberland before. I mean,
Yeah.
living in Ireland, it wasn't somewhere it was ever mentioned.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
next thing is this little sort of independent kingdom up in this mad place, and there, and they told all these mad stories about the beautiful crags and the sort of the out of the wayness of it all, and the people. Always a lot of you have heard lots of stories, but they're all really adventurous stories and real full of gusto and sort of this amazing thing to hear about because in Ireland the scene was so tiny and it's so spread out. It just seemed like an amazing big gang. The other thing we of course knew about was in cartoon comics you had jocks and geordies, and this whole thing that conjured up what a geordie was, this sort
Hmm.
of like a rough tumble sort of scrapper with big forearms and always up for a bit of a tumble.
Yeah.
And then later in that, I moved to Sheffield and I started seeing magazines. And there was a magazine one time, and these pictures of Kylo and back Bowden and Kylo in the woods, and Bowden people on things like the Manta, and this all came together to make this amazing sort of image of this beautiful place up in the northeast, this kingdom. Like it's sort of seemed more like a kingdom than anything. And I've always been really interested in Northumberland and the people who lived and climbed there. And that's to say, in the stories, you were always like the probably the protagonist of. It seemed like a real, really hard, staunch ethic of people having lots of fun and really pushing themselves on these. When I saw the routes, I saw how beautiful these climbs were, and so to come now, I've never met you, so it's really amazing to come and speak to you now. And I just so love to hear about all these tales because I forget most of them now that I was told, but I'd be really love to hear a bit about it from you, the
Yeah.
king, the king.
No, 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 no. I think Gavin might have embroiled it a bit.
Oh well, that's the point, isn't it? Of
Oh,
course
yeah.
you do. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
But I mean, it is its own little kingdom, Northumberland. It's. I don't know if you've been to some of the more obscure crags, but it's a fantastic place. You know, once you get away, I mean, Bowden Doors, Kailo, back of Bowden Doors, I mean, they're quite popular now. But when we were first climbing there was only us and Dave Cuthbertson and a few lads from Scotland used to
Uh
come
huh.
down, Murray Hamilton and Spade on them, you know.
Right, right. Yeah,
They
I've
were
met
the,
some of those guys. Some of the guys you
yeah,
mentioned, Spider and Dave.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, they were the main lads that we used to meet. They used to come down. They,
So just to rewind a little bit, Bob. Before you started climbing, there was there like a history of climbing? Was there like a
yeah,
vibe up
yeah,
there?
yeah. The NMC had been going for a few years. People like Nev Hannaby and people, they had
Right,
done quite a bit of climbing down there, you know.
right.
Dave Roberts, who the Yorkshireman who lives up here now, he was part of the scene that was breaking through the breakthroughs of the new route, you know.
Right.
Back in the day. I mean, there's quite a
Uh
few
huh.
people, Bevan that done the sea cliffs and things like that, you know.
Right, right.
I mean, there's so much history in Northumberland, yet it'd be hard to get a grip of the whole thing, you know, as an
Right.
individual.
Uh
I
huh.
mean, you can research it and write it all down, but it's unless you're there when that's actually happening, the beginning, it's hard
Right.
to realize what went on. So obviously, some of the things are done on like the Wannies and Craiglough, must have been, you know, pretty hard men. You know what I mean? Because
Right. Right.
I mean,
Why?
bit of hosiery around your waist and
But
gets
that
a
was the
bit tough.
vibe back then, wasn't that? That's what all climbing was, wasn't it? Just
Yeah,
balls
yeah,
out up.
yeah. I think places. I mean, like Craiglough. I mean, they basically face north. You know what I mean? So you're
Mm.
getting you're getting the worst of the weather.
So Crag Luff is sort of underneath Hadrian's Wall.
Yeah, it's just underneath Hadrian's Wall.
Bleak?
Yeah, it's very bleak in the winter. I mean,
yeah.
They used to go up in all sorts of weathers. I mean, unfortunately, when I first started climbing with my brother Tommy, we used to go up there sort of in the middle of the winter, not realizing that, how naive can you get, that it would be freezing cold and soaking wet and everything else. But I mean, fair dues, we just used to get on with it. There's a pub there, the Wansbrood, I think. Yeah, the Wansbrood, which is about a mile walk from the crag.
Right.
At lunchtime, even in the winter, it got about 12 o'clock. We used to leave the crag, walk for the 1 mile sort of thing, and then stroll on back, have a couple of beers, stroll back and start climbing again,
Right.
And back in them days, you had to get the bus from Bardon Mill, which was...
So, Bob, would you climb better before the pints or after the pints?
You fell off more when you'd had a pint.
It didn't hurt as much.
You were braver. Wasn't a great idea, really. Yeah. But, when we first started climbing, we've done that just about on every crag, Bowden Doors and everything,
Right.
I think the only one we didn't really have a beer on was places like the Wannies, just basically because it was too far to walk,
Right.
Took an hour and a half to walk in from the bus.
Right. Yeah, that's a long way back to the pub.
Yeah, a long way back for the pint.
So just for listeners, it's whenever Northumberland is one of the places we always went in, is always on somewhere we always wanted to go to. But I get the impression I don't get the impression it's so visited these days by maybe modern climbers. Let's describe it for people who might not have been there. It's quite just rolling hills, isn't it?
Yeah. That's exactly what it's like. The crags, most of the crags are sandstone, so they're left over from after the Ice Age type of thing, when it stripped her all away. So all the hills are rolling with a lot of farms are like little crofts as well. Very isolated area. Not a lot of going on up there. There's some really good areas, and some which aren't so, I wouldn't say not so pretty, but if you go up to say Shillington, which is a lovely place, nice view, and then you can go into the firing ranges, South Yardhope and places like that, which are kind of nice to be, but are dangerous places to be, Ling Shields and stuff like that.
Why? Because they're getting blown up?
Yeah. Well, there's a place called Ling Shields, which is a good friend of mine, John Earl. He never used to like going up there, for obvious reasons, because when you get there, you can see these big potholes in the ground where the explosions have went off and everything, and the trees had big branches missing, and it's quite an eerie place,
Like sort of spooky kind of...
Spooky, so, Northumberland goes from that to the sublime, Bowden Doors and stuff like that, they're really gorgeous places, back of Bowden Doors, half in the trees, half out,
But Bowden Doors is this beautiful wave of golden sandstone. It must be is it like a kilometre? No, not quite a kilometre. It's not far off a kilometre.
It's not far off a kilometre long, yeah. I mean, there is no kind of walking either. I mean, when you stand there and look out, I mean, in an evening when the sun's going down, you get the sun going down behind the Cheviots and stuff, it's great.
Just heaven.
It is. In the winter, you get all the geese coming in, the grey lag geese, and they come in flocks, and, they sort of rest in the fields below the crags and that. And certain times of the year when they're migrating, that's absolutely stunning.
It's always, for some reason, it's got a kind of thing about it that makes me slightly sad, because it's kind of so beautiful. And my experience in Northumberland is going to some crag and then going there on the Sunday and having to in the sun sets, and it's just so beautiful. You don't want to leave, but you just want to stay there, but you got to leave. And so there's something about that kind of, when I look at it, I go, look at that place.
Yeah, I mean, you can basically stay there till dark. It's only a 5-minute walk to your car. But to get the real ambulance, you've got to stay there till after dark. You know what I mean?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, we used to go climbing at the far end of the crag, and me and my brother used to come off there. We call it the trail area, where the routes of trail are, and we used to boulder, climb, and muck about. And we'd be on there till 9 o'clock at night, and then have to walk off, and it would be absolutely pitch black,
Right.
So that's how we get a real good feel of it, because the whole place comes alive as well with the foxes and night jaws and all sorts of things that's up there, owls and everything,
Right.
You get a real good sense.
One of the things about this, and you think about, when you think about places like, here's one of the classic crags up there is Kyloe in the Woods.
Kyloe, yeah.
And it's got pine trees all around it.
Yeah.
Short, steep bouldering crag.
Yeah.
But whenever I first heard about it, they talked about things like pixies living there, almost like a sort of anything could happen.
Yeah.
There's sort of goblins and pixies, and there's a route called Elf Direct. It's got that Tolkien sort of vibe about it. Where if you were there by yourself, you sort of see the bushes rustling kind of thing, don't you?
Well, I've been there by myself at night time. And so has my brother. He's been there by himself when he was younger. But I've been a couple of times and walked out in the dark, and you have no idea how accurate, how intense your senses are. I mean, everything you hear, if pheasant from a distance flying, anything, and it's really sort of eerie. And it is the world of Tolkien and things like that. I mean, you can just imagine things. Little hobbits popping out of the grass, or elves and things like that. It's absolutely stunning,
And one of the things about it is there's just so much fewer people up there, isn't there, than the Peak or Yorkshire. It's not had so many humans. They sort of wash away the magic as there has.
No, I mean, when I used to come out, even with the lads, just as you leave the woods, you can see right up into Scotland, and you can see the very small lights, you know what I mean, of the houses and basically the little hamlets. And I used to think, dear me, it must have been a nightmare for people getting raided by, Scotch and Picts coming down from Scotland. And that would be like their little campfires burning in the distance.
Yeah.
And, it actually happened. It was this... the Border Reivers and that, they used to come down and get
dirty Scotchmen. Dirty Scotchmen coming down to sort of cause trouble.
Yeah, they were half Irish, really. Used to try to keep them at bay. But yeah, you imagine
that was Border County, wasn't it? It was Border County.
Yeah.
That's what I guess the Hadrian's Wall was an acknowledgement of that.
Yeah. Well, Hadrian's Wall was really a trading post, I think. But
was it?
Yeah, it's a trading post. But, there was a statement, I think, by Rome to sort of like say, this belongs to Rome and that belongs to whoever wants it further north.
Right, okay, yeah.
But, the Border Raiders, the Border Reivers, should I say, they were pretty bad. They used to come down and kill and rape, pillage, pinch your sheep, your cows, your family, whatever they could get their hands on, basically.
Right. Who were they?
The Border Reivers were basically I'll call them Scottish, not jocks, but Scottish people that lived rough. There was families, set families that used to come down and raid into Northumberland,
Right.
So
I wouldn't say they're very nice to the people they're raiding.
No, I don't think we're very nice at all. No. I think it was an absolute nightmare.
Right, okay. Because one of the things about when you're up there, it feels like rich country. That's what I always think about it. It sort of feels like because it's really good farmland and today it feels very sort of settled and steady somehow.
Yeah. I mean, the land's fairly fertile. It's only when you get to a certain height. But I think there's only about 5 families or whatever. The Percys and people like that, Trevelyan's that own most of Northumberland.
Right.
I think the Duke of Northumberland is something like the 3rd richest man in the country.
Right.
Or he was at one stage. He lives in Anna Castle there.
Right.
I mean, he owned half a dozen families own all of Northumberland, which is, probably the way it was when you had kings, when you had to fight for the king,
Yeah.
You got your rewards, you got a bit more land every time you went to war. Keep the Scottish from coming down, keep James out.
Yeah. So, just before we start talking about the climate a bit more, I want to go back to sort of there's a thing about, because you grew up in Northumberland, I believe
Yeah.
that's where you're from. I
Yeah.
just want to sort of, because
Newcastle.
and that's Northumberland,
Yeah.
Newcastle.
Yeah.
And Newcastle seems central to the story of Northumberland climbing, because I guess that's, most people didn't live in Northumberland, they lived in Newcastle and travelled
Yeah.
there. I just want to, back in, you were born around 1950, 51.
51, yeah.
So Newcastle, I always think of these big, massive cities. Newcastle's got a real identity to itself. And was it a real flourishing place in the 60s,
Yeah.
70s, 80s? What was it like? It's a big powerhouse of a city, wasn't it, back then?
Yeah, I mean, it's great. It was a great place to be brought up. But I mean, there was definitely a line drawn between the rich and the poor, shall we say.
Right.
All the working men that were in like the shipyards, the coal mines, steel industry, railways and all that, they weren't that well paid, you know what I mean? They were pretty poorly paid.
Right.
And you had to work for your corners, as they say.
Uh-huh.
But the rich was obviously the gentry and people that owned the pits and that, you know, but they tended to live away. They lived in Hexham and Corbridge, places like that, you know. Alnwick, maybe Alnwick. There wasn't a lot lived up at Alnwick, because that was the Duke's place.
Right. So what was it like for a young man growing up in that city at that time?
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant. You know, it's great fun. It was all, you know, rough and ready, obviously. It wasn't that pleasant for a lot of people. You know, a lot of people didn't have money. Most of the men were hard working, hard fighting men. You know, they weren't very gentle, shall we say. You know, if you stepped out of line, it was a clip across the lug, or you kick up the backside. You know, they didn't sort of take prisoners.
And that's the word. You grew up in that sort of pretty physical kind of no nonsense kind of environment.
Oh yeah, it was certainly a dog-eat-dog sort of scenario. I mean, I was small. I was quite small now, but I was smaller when I was little, and that sort of made you fight more because you didn't want to be put down or beaten or whatever. And everybody was like that as well, mind. I mean, it wasn't just like me personally. The whole of where I lived, I mean, we lived just outside the shipyards, literally, you know, first door sort of thing. And it was, you know, it was great fun. You know, you can't say it wasn't. But at night time, when the shift work was on, when we were building the ships, I mean, it was the same noise as through the day. So you'd be lying in bed at night time, and you know, the hammering and banging and wrenching of cranes, and you could see the sparks off the welders and everything. You know, you could hear the men shouting at each other, and you know, it was just strange upbringing, but great fun, you know.
Right. What do you mean, great fun? Just
well, I mean, when you're young, you don't have the responsibility there. So up to the age of 15, when you left school, I mean, everything was just open range, wasn't it? You just done what you wanted. You know, you went climbing birds' nests and climbing on top of the schools, and you know, sneak into the shipyards and pinch things, woods, bikes, whatever you could get your hands on, because you didn't have anything yourself. So it was just a case of help yourself if you could.
Was it sort of lawless?
Well, pretty lawless. Oh, definitely. I mean, the community run. I mean, there used to be a police station there, but it was a bit of distance from where I lived. I mean, everybody just done what they wanted. But I mean, I think the thing was, I mean, there wasn't alarms on shops and things like that, but they had big dogs, you know. And if you done anything wrong to somebody, you know, pinned somebody's fence 4 yards, you know, 4 houses up the road, or done something like that, I mean, there would be the husband or the father would come down and sort you out, and if that didn't work, you'd sort your father out as well. So, you know, you had this sort of lawless, all right, just have a fight, you know.
Different sort of law, isn't it? It's a
law. Yeah, well, it worked. It kept people in place. I mean, the women were the same. The women would fight, no bother at all, you know.
Right, like actually get down to it.
Oh yeah, grabbing hair and scratching, and you know, then the men would bungle into it and just have a street ball, you know. I mean, this wasn't happening all the time, obviously. It was just, I mean, most aggravation was disciplined by the parents, but it was nearly always instigated by the children, you know.
Right.
The troublemakers were the kids, you know.
Right.
Pinching the cabbages out of the garden or whatever, you know.
If you got a memory, have you got a memory of a particular fight been involved in or witnessing back then? A particular.
Well, we're commonplace. I mean, just up the road from where we lived, there was a pub called the Stack Hotel. I mean, a lad got stabbed. Well, I'd say a lad. He'd have been about 25, 30. He got stabbed in there. And they were pretty rough. I mean, the rooms in the pub in the Stack, there was the bar, which was the bar. And then they had 2 rooms off that. One room was called the slaughter end, and the other room was called the suicide room. So if you went into any of them rooms and you weren't a local, you were good chance to get thrown out, physically.
But what about you? Were you ever sort of one that you were involved in?
Yeah, I used to fight all the time. I was part of the business, wasn't it? Fighting was just what I done.
Did it hurt? Would you get how would you get hurt in them?
Well, obviously, you never used to get black eyes because it was more like biting and scratching, punching around your neck and that, I mean,
right.
As adults, when you have fights in the town or down Whitley Bay, that was a different ball game. I mean, some of them used to, a bit like Glasgow, I suppose, grab the glasses and throw things around and tables and chairs. That was, but it was just good fun.
Right. And was that your sort of late teens were involved?
Yeah,
in
it's when you started drinking, really, when you were sort of like 10-year-old,
Right. Yeah.
No, just when you're about 17, 18, that sort of age, that lasts till you get married when you're about in your 20s,
Right.
You tend to keep away from the trouble the best you can when you're in your 20s because a lot of the lads had children by then, and jobs, right. And you had to get to work. You couldn't go to work with half your ear missing or a broken leg or something. So.
And what about you? Did you got married? What time did you get married, or is this true for you too?
Yeah. I got married when I was 21. Still married to the same woman. She's upstairs at the moment, reading the newspaper while I'm doing that. Yeah.
What's her name?
Linda. Yeah.
Where'd you meet her?
I've known her since I was 12.
Right.
So we're like childhood sweethearts almost. Not totally like, 12-year-old. But right. Known her since I was 12.
What's she like about you?
Sorry?
What did she like about you?
Well, I didn't have a mustache then. I think it was quite a nice person.
Right.
No, beats me what you liked about it. I don't know.
So you get married at 21. God, seems so young now, doesn't it? That sort of get married at that age.
Well, she was 18 at the time.
Right.
18, 19. So, I mean, it's been good. Great. I mean, climbing-wise, I mean, my wife is absolutely fantastic. I mean, Drew's wife's quite good. And, I mean, John Earl's wife, I mean, she was fantastic. That's probably why me and John teamed up because our wives were really... compatible as, they didn't mind us going climbing, So,
right.
That's 10 brilliant years climbing with John before. So, like Andrew came around, Andrew Earl. He started climbing.
So, just go back. How'd climbing come along then?
How did I start climbing?
Yeah, how'd that come into here? Was that a thing?
No. When my brother moved to London, and he lived in London for about 3 years, and he met a lad called
Tommy.
Tommy, yes. I was mentioning names, and he met my sister married a lad called John Mountain. Now he was already a climber. Have you heard of Terry King?
No.
Terry King. Well, John Mountain and Terry King they're both from Sheffield, brilliant climbers. They used to jump on the back of a motorbike from Sheffield, and they drove up to the Old Man of Hoy and done the second ascent without aid. With the Old Man of Hoy. And anyway, once John had married my sister, my brother obviously they knew each other obviously down south. And then my brother came back home, and he introduced us to climbing. As I say, I was 21 at the time, 19, 21. That's what 2 years.
Just before you were married, just before.
Just before I was married. Yeah.
Right.
So,
how'd that feel? Was there some? Do you remember first experiencing it?
Experience the climbing side of it.
Climbing, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the first couple of years when I started climbing, it wasn't really for the climbing. It was more for the just being away from the city, from Newcastle, from the ravages of the town, really.
Right.
So that was really good, Of course, we used to have a beer all the time, have a pint on the way up there and a pint on the way back and a pint in between. So,
right.
It was all just good fun and laugh, But then it was, like you say, it was basically a hose around your belly and just see what happened,
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously nylon ropes came in. We started, what was happening really, we were soloing routes with the rope on, but never put a runner in.
Mm.
You know what I mean? You just,
yeah.
The only one that got a good time of it was the second who came up on the top rope, basically.
Right, yeah.
But then a lot of the time, the next time you did that particular crag, he would lead it or solo it,
Right.
Yeah, it was good fun.
And did you take to it apart after this 2-year thing? Did something click for you? Because there can't have been many people doing it. I'm guessing there was very few people climbing up there at the time.
Well, there was climbers around, but you'd go on the crag and you wouldn't see someone. It wasn't like going now. There'd be maybe somebody at the far end. You'd maybe talk to them, maybe not. Just depended if you knew who they were. If you didn't know who they were, it would be like a hello and goodbye.
Mm.
But, I think we went to the lakes quite a bit, and went down to Wales and stuff like that. And then I started to enjoy the whole thing of climbing rather than being in the countryside.
Right.
But to be honest with you, I knew I was kind of quite good at it as well. Most of the time I was the best. Apart from my brother, obviously, I was the best climber on the crag, even if there was 20 people there.
Mm.
So I was quite happy just plodding around, just doing my own thing.
Right.
Probably you didn't think you were the best climber on the crag then. You just sort of were doing things and people would be stopping what you're doing them.
Right.
So that's what you sort of, what's the matter with him? Well, why doesn't he to go and do something, and to be standing watching you doing them, Sometimes because they're probably pretty dangerous, pretty necky,
Right. Did that feel cool to be looked at like that?
I don't know. I'm not really one for people looking at us, and when I'm climbing, I don't even like people talking to us, even if they're telling us I've missed a handhold or tried a different way. I just like my own space. I quite like climbing by myself. I used to love it when I was younger, just being on the crag by yourself, and just get on and do it and keep out of people's way, really,
Yeah.
Climbing was a private thing then, not a public thing. There still is a private thing now,
Yeah.
Quite often now.
So, Bob, I'm sort of, just from the tiny bit I know of you, I get the impression you're kind of philosophical.
Yeah, sort of.
Climbing's a philosophical pursuit for you as much as
the
countryside is it's a mental thing. Is that? I don't know why I say. I just get.
Yeah, well, I think the pressure of climbing is a release at the same time. Kind of like the valve, if you want. It gets rid of the pressures from around you, even from your friends. Sometimes,
Right.
And sometimes when you're by yourself, you hear more, you see more. Because you're not talking everything. The birds are there, and you can hear the grass, you can hear the rabbits nipping about, and
Yeah.
when there's 2 or 3 years, even though it's really good banter and fun, you miss everything else.
Right.
You lose that part of it. You lose the serenity, if you want, of the climbing on the crag by yourself.
Right.
Of course, before you had telephones, the consequences of soloing something 40 foot by yourself that you hadn't done, a bit iffy because there's no telephones. So you'd have been there for a few days.
Yeah, I bet you didn't worry much about that, did you?
You didn't know, thankfully. Yeah. When I think back to some of the stunts I used to pull by myself, crazy.
Right. So for you, is the sort of it allowed you to sort of look into nature and feel nature in a way that, I guess, coming from this tough sort of urban environment, you sort of
that's the fullest. That was the full escape. I mean, I used to go into the countryside anyway by myself, and then I used to go with a couple of friends and that. That's how we found Callyhoos, was walking with a friend. We just came over the back of it, So all these things of big group climbing. obviously I've claimed at Stanage and Mallams and all these, but I got pushed away from them by myself because they were too crowded, you know.
Right. Yeah.
People were talking about left foot, right foot, do this, do that. Why don't you try this? And I used to watch them and go, oh dear me, you know, it just didn't seem to be the right reasons for climbing. You know, climbing has always been like you, the rock, and
okay. Here's the thing then, Bob. You said you sort of had this thing early on. It didn't sound like an ego thing, but you realized I was the best climber here in this at this crag, and in that case, how can someone who's not as good as you give you advice? Was there part of that? Well, how can they tell me something? Because I'm better than them at this. Yeah, and I don't mean in an ego way, but there must be some. They don't know anything I don't know.
Well, if you're at, say, like Bowden Doors, for instance, and most people know Bowden Doors, and you climb up the well-known crack, and then you start traversing away from it. They're starting to try to tell you to go back to the crack. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What you're doing is a variation on it, that type of thing, you know.
Right. Yeah.
And I didn't used to always stay on the line. That's how I started doing new routes, you know. Or, you know, start up one thing and then just within 10 foot of being up, start traversing across to something else, you know.
Right.
I found that was the bigger buzz than just doing the lane, you know.
Right. That means because I guess it means because you're comfortable in that situation with the unknown, and you're not stressed by that. Was climbing always sort of free from stress and sort of I'm at home here sort of thing?
Yeah, I was as comfortable 5 foot off the ground as I was 45 foot off the ground. Right. I didn't have any qualms about it. Right. I mean, I used to have the attitude, me and John, as if you fell off at 40, 45 foot, you break a leg, and that's the name of the game. That was the nature of climbing. The risk you took was to break a leg. You know, obviously, you'd be worried if you thought you were going to knock your spine through the back of your head.
Right.
You know, that's why the sort of like jumping off culture sort of developed from. You know, you'd be trying something on site, and it would go pear-shaped on you. You know what I mean? There'd be nothing there. There'd be no handholds, or you know, something would go wrong, and then you just had to turn around and you just jump off, you know.
Right. So that's one of the things I heard about early on, this very strict, I don't know if ethic's the right word, but the approach to climbing, you start at the bottom and you climb up the top. You sort of maybe don't clean things, you just, as you said, that's what the game was. It was just to be in that place was the game. Yeah. And was that true? Was that a strict thing?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Oh, for sure. I mean, I'm not saying that everybody done was not cleaned off, but the bulk of them were always seriously tried from the bottom upwards. You know, and there maybe be 2 or 3 people trying the same route. So you take off. You know, we just use Bowden Doors again for an instance. You could be back at Bowden Doors or the Oneies. You'd climb up sort of 10 foot, nice and safe, and then all of a sudden you couldn't do it. You know, or 30 foot you couldn't do it. You maybe was on the wave at Bowden Doors where you just come to this big roll of rock. You know,
right?
You know, oh, this is a bit awkward. You know, so you either had to climb down, but you'd committed everything to get that high. You know what I mean? You'd really
gone balls out.
Yeah, you'd put your life on the line if you went over the roof, because back then, certainly probably more so on the Merlin walls, the heather used to be hanging over the top, you know, or right to the edge, and Bowden Doors was very similar. Under the wave at Bowden Doors, there used to be about 30 or 40 pigeons nesting on there.
Right.
So when you got to the break, it was just covered in guano from one end to the other, you know, so you're guaranteed to take the fall, you know.
So your people were like sort of, you mean like people would jump off from 30 feet?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, it was part of the business. I mean, there's obviously a price to pay. I mean, I've got one artificial hip. John Earl's got 2 artificial hips, 2 artificial knees. Alec Burns has got 2 artificial hips. Mike Arnold's got 2 artificial hips. Everybody, there's not one who hasn't got artificial parts. Obviously, due to doing that, you know.
So, you talked about that sort of the solitude and getting you sort of seeing the nature. Was there also like a competitive vibe amongst, because you talk about these other people, were there people, saying you went to the crag, would you go to the crag as a group, or would there be last known? I'm sort of jumping forward a bit, because I'm talking about how you get attuned with climbing in Northumberland and then start doing new routes and pushing the standards forward a bit. So for listeners, is that what happened? You sort of developed as a climber, and then suddenly you're doing new routes, the hardest routes around in the county. Was that true? Is that the way it was?
Yeah, it's basically what happened. I mean,
and was there like a few of you doing it, or was it mainly you, or was it like a small group? Or
in the beginning, it was just me and my brother who were climbing together, doing new routes, be it Crag, Lough, or wherever. Just spotting the lines and doing them. And then there was a lad, unfortunately, who's not with us now, Bob Hutchison, and he used to climb with John Earl. And I mean, they were probably at least 2 full grades ahead of us at the time. There's no, you know what I mean? We were climbing maybe VS, hard VS, and they were climbing E1, you know, in E2s. I mean, that was a bit of an eye opener. They brought out a supplement, a climbing supplement to Northumberland. Which was very good, actually, even though we used to give it nasty names. It was a very good supplement, and it just basically opened your eyes up to what was possible, you know.
Right.
And as I say, I'd around about the same time, I'd came across Callahew's with a friend who he was
Callahew's is alongside what do you call that long? Is it the Pennine? Is it the Pennine Way?
Just off the Pennine Way.
God, it's just such a beautiful, just so full of nature, isn't it? Just so, it's just such a beautiful place, isn't it?
Oh, it's fantastic. I mean, when we first went there with my brother, that's not with my friend, we drove. I went there for one trip with a lad called Peter Alderson. When I went with my brother the second time, knocked on the farm door and said, "Is it all right to go up to the crag?" And he says, "Yeah, no bother at all." And he walked halfway there to point to the easiest way to get to the crag, because like a bit of a marshy bit in the middle. He pointed the easiest way, and so we went climbing, came back, and on the bonnet of the car was 2 trays of chicken eggs. He left eggs for her, you know.
No way.
So we knocked on the door to say thank you. She says, "Oh yeah." She said, "No bother." She said, "But when you come up next time, just let us know that you're here and that you're going up there. But if you see any sheep lambing or in distress or anything like that, just come back and tell us." And so, well, fair enough, you know. Which as it happened, we never came across any sheep. But every time we went on the crag, we got a tray of eggs.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just for checking it. You know, he was such a nice bloke. You know.
I've knocked in the farmhouse up there, and it was really you knock in that farm. Is the farm for dove holes or something. And there's such lovely people, aren't there? The farmers up there were really lovely.
Yeah, they're lovely people.
Really nice, really lovely.
Yeah. I mean, you know, you're going to get the odd one that might say no to you. There's a crag. There's a couple of crags where the landowners, there's tenant farmers, who mostly aren't that keen on you being anywhere near the place. You know, basically in case you leave gates open and stuff like that. But the bulk of them are really, really good lads. You know. Good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So the Callahew's the first. You first started doing new routes that were good ones for you.
The Callahew's was a total change of type of climbing. What Callahew's is, if you look at Callahew's, it's more potholes than crimps. It's nearly all potholes and all rounded finishes, which was totally new to me, because I mean I've been climbing at Bowden Doors and the likes, you know, Kyle in the Woods and that.
They're really positive, crimpy, aggressive sort of things, aren't they?
Yeah, back at Bowden, little nippy, naily things, you know, little crimps. Whereas that was like funny potholes. So I found that was fascinating. Because there was so many combinations, you know, you could put your fingers in, your thumbs in, you could press down on them, you know, and get really high with your fingers down. And so, you know, I found that it was, well, basically it was a whole different type of climbing, you know, never done anything like that before, you know. I mean, you get your pothole in Northumberland, but not like a whole crag of it, you know. So, you know, it's very varied climbing, and I took it like a duck to water, you know, I loved it, yeah. Yeah, because you had everything, didn't you? You had nice former, you had eggs, you had solitude, you had a nice walk-in. There was never anybody there, so you could have everything that you wanted in climbing was just in one big lump, one big crag.
And you get pure bouldering plus high ball plus
high ball,
nearly soloing. It's some stuff that's nearly soloing, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of routes I've done there. Well, there's one at the far end called Green Fluff. It's a strange name. Well, it's not particularly hard. It's about I think it's about E3, sort of 6A stroke big. But doing the crux, you had to like cross over and cross around the corner. And you're constantly coming off it. And I must have fell off it 6 times. I was holding with Peter Kern at the time. I fell off it about 6 times. You take about a 20-foot fall, and then you hit this. You're going straight into the bracken, which was on a slope on that part. So you were like 30 foot before you stopped, And that sort of like really turned me on that you could do this sort of thing, without putting runners in anything, just start soloing these things, So,
right.
It was really massive buzz. So what we're basically realised at Callyhoo's, so you could go to Callyhoo's and just clean the top off and look over and reach down as far as you could to the little pockets and clean them off. And then just climb them, So you didn't have to have all the restraints of cleaning them off, because I mean, a lot of it was quite dirty. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's pretty exposed, isn't it?
No, yeah, it was filthy. I mean, so I think there'd been a fire there as well, so a lot of the lichen and that was like burnt and crispy and dirty,
Right.
So you could clean them, start climbing at the bottom and clean them just with your hands, and then get to the obviously halfway and then take the chance, and then you had a good idea what the top would be like. Right. All the tops, if you've been there, you know what they're like. They're absolutely all 9 out of 10 of them are sort of round you like this. You know what I mean?
Aye, yeah.
Dragging yourself
a bit scratchy.
You're pushing down with one hand and trying to pull over with the other. And you realise if it goes pear-shaped, you're just going to go, like a plank of wood straight over. So, that was great fun.
Oh yeah. When you're young and strong and your body can take that stuff, can't it?
Yeah, you're up for it, aren't you? It's part of the buzz, isn't it?
Huh. So is what's the cool route? There's Crouching the Mahogany.
Crouching Mahogany, yeah.
Does that mean taking a shit? Does that mean taking a shite?
Well, the mahogany is a toilet seat. So
okay. Right.
Crouching Mahogany, so you're basically having a crap.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
One of the when I'd done it, one of the moves was very subtle, and I had my left foot bent backwards and my right foot bent backwards, almost like you're sitting on the toilet. It was a cross between an Egyptian and a dropsy sort of thing. And that's how I sort of like made up the distance to stretch out of it. And there was 2 moves on that. So both moves on Crouching Mahogany, there's 2 cruxes, and they're both about 6 feet. So they're coming on 7A sort of thing, not 7 about the arse.
And they still stop people. They still stop good climbers, don't they, with pads, those sort of things?
How do you mean? Say again?
That route could still stop.
Oh yeah.
A good climber.
Oh, there's a lot of people that there's more tried it and not got up it than there has. I mean, to get up Crouching the Mahogany, you've got to be technically very efficient, and you've got to be able to hold yourself together, because the top again, it's 30 foot, but it's pencil type drop. You'll come down straight down. So
with no pads, no pads.
Yeah,
1980s, sometime in the 1980s. When was that?
I've been in the 80s, 80, 84, 85. I made a list of when I'd done different things in case were needed, but I'll not shuffle through them.
Right.
Yeah, well, 80, 83s, 84s,
Yeah. So you sort of said that was Callyhoo's is one of the first places you started doing new routes. So I guess that was previous to Crouching Mahogany. You mean, because I get the impression you were doing new routes in the 70s. Yeah,
we continued to do them. I had 3 or 4 different visits to do the new routes,
Right.
With Crouching, well, I've probably got the information in here somewhere,
Did you ever meet? I'm sort of thinking what you're doing around the same time. People like John Allen and Al Manson were doing similar sort of stuff. Did you ever meet those guys or come across those guys?
I'm not sure about John Allen. We met them on the crags and that. You like kind of bump into them, but like I say, we used used to keep ourselves to ourselves, you know.
Right.
We didn't do all of their stuff, but stuff like Green Death were done. I'm not sure if it wasn't before John Allen.
Right.
That type of thing, you know. I mean, we done, me and my brother done Green Death. I think it was John Allen had done it, because there was a photograph of him standing on a stone
Yes.
in one of the magazines. And that magazine, we went down there and done it. And basically soloed it, because I never seen any peg. Somebody said it was a peg after I'd done it. I never see any peg. But I remember going up the Blinken corner. It was a bit like Northumberland, you know what I mean?
Mm.
Sort of iffy, touchy gooey. Am I going to come off? Am I going to stay on? That type of climbing, you know.
Right.
So that was really good. Yeah, I mean, Bannercroft and that were bumped into. Like I say, we just bumped into them, you know.
Right.
Yeah. Got to know. Sorry.
What was your connection to the Crags? And so you spent a lot of. There was a slideshow last night in the NMC chat by Andy Birtwistle.
Andy, yeah.
When you look at this, you get that sort of thing of back when you're younger, going to the Crag, loads and loads and loads, and when you're there doing loads and loads and loads of stuff.
Yeah. Well, that's the way it was. I mean, I think it was Simon said in Ravenswood. I was doing like 4 or 5 routes in a Wednesday evening, you know,
right?
Because you were doing them on site and you weren't cleaning them off. You know, so I mean, the grades now, I mean, some of them were like E3s, E4s, stuff like that, you know.
Right.
But eventually, I mean, you had to clean them off, because we're getting, like a Ravenswood, we're getting too high to turn around and jump off, you know what I mean?
Right.
So even though we tried most of them from the bottom, I think as well then at that time we were starting to get into the blanker stuff, the ones that looked more impossible, more imposing as well when you looked at them. So you just used to add down them. I mean, just see how they panned out, you know.
Right.
Clean them off. I mean, we used to practice the moves, and I think our top rope was none of that stuff. I mean, cleaning them off would have been like not even a toothbrush, but like a little hand brush, you know what I mean? Just go down and rub it with a rag. You know, it's what all you had. You didn't have lapis brushes and wire brushes and stuff. It was just clear off the best you could, you know.
Right. So, you know, you sort of, when you think of somebody climbing to get better, was there a climb you did? I've experienced this where a climb you do feels like this one takes you to the next level. You sort of, one that pushes you in many ways, and sort of that you get through, and then you say, fuck, I just did that one, I've just done that. Did you have experiences like that as you're going on as a climber? Yeah,
I think they're sort of like when I've done Barbarian and Roger and things like that, but they're like E5, 6 Bs, you know.
Right.
And they're nails now, you know what I mean? Like 7A plus 7 Bs. I knew when I was doing them, that was a benchmark, you know. And I suppose in some respects, the other one was when I first done Australia Crack, which is a Kilo out of the woods. It was done by Bob Hutchison and John Earl. That was a pain in the arse to do the first time. I think I fell off it about 6 times when I first, it's just on site trying, and that was quite hard. In fact, it was very hard at the time. And when I'd done that, I knew then I was in their league. You know what I mean? I'd moved into their league, and they were the boys about town. You know. So
what got you there? What got you into their league?
Well,
did you train or just climb all the time, or did you just find your inner drive, whatever that was? Your sort of
Well, when I started doing them, different things were happening in your life. I came across a place called Jesmond Dean, which is like a mini Pex Hill type, crammed in with Travers.
I've been there. Yeah.
That's
near where Gaza lived near there, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, it's the. You know, this is where Gaza, right? You know, Gaza climbing. It'd have been a good drinking partner.
Yeah.
Yeah. I sort of like start training at Jesmond Dean, and you know what used to happen at Jesmond Dean is I would do something, say like a small traverse, and if I was tired doing it, I would do it twice, and then I would do it 3 times until you know I used to time myself. If other people came down the Dean and said, "Oh, I've just done this traverse. I used to do it twice. In the end, the hard traverse on the hard wall of Jesmond Dean, which is probably 7A, I used to do like 10 times in an hour.
Mm.
And it was complicated. It's not
Right.
straightforward. And it's hard. It's very hard traverse. I used to do that like 10 times in the hour, then go home. And then next time I used to go there, I used to think, right, what I'll do this time, I'll put little sticks on some of the footholds randomly. But you couldn't knock the stick off, so you couldn't use the foothold.
Right.
So I used to train like that and make up your own problems by moving the sticks and things like that, you know.
Huh.
So that was the training. I mean, that they call it training now because it's bouldering, but back then it wasn't really called training. Training was what people done in gyms, you know what I mean?
Right.
Training was
Yeah.
weightlifting or something like that, you know. So we just got on and done that. I mean, it was great fun, you know. I mean, well, you know yourself, climbing is, it's addictive, you know.
Mm.
It's just great fun, you know. And the more you train, the harder you climb, and the better you feel about doing it. You know, there's nothing better than doing a good line in complete control. You know what I mean? Instead of sort of flapping all over the place and thinking, where's that number 2 runner? Or, you know what I mean? Just in complete control of yourself, you know? Yeah.
So that sounds like a sort of a mastery thing. You're after that mastery
I
feeling.
Yeah. I think one of my sort of assets in some respects was I could climb the same grade up height as I could lower on the ground. And because I could control my head, you know, even in the lakes and that when you were doing the big numbers in the lakes, and you know the consequences were dire. You hadn't absolutely down them or nothing, just doing them all on site. Just be able to stay there and be in control, you know. And you know, you used to watch other lads doing the same or trying the same things and would be nowhere near it. Or you watch somebody putting a runner in, you could see their leg going like Elvis leg, you know what I mean? Because it was getting the head was getting the grip of their body. You know what I mean? So we're starting to lose it. And you say, oh, don't think about the runner. Just focus on relaxing. You know what I mean? Just relax.
Right. Did you think about that? Or did you sort of was it natural, or did you sort of look into your own mind and sort of see how you could be in that place?
Well, a couple of I was quite natural and quite good, but a couple of times when you knew it was on the line, you know what I mean, where you knew a fall was going to put you in the graveyard, I just used to shut my eyes. Just used to keep all the holes, get in a nice comfy position, and just close my eyes, just for 5-10 seconds, you know. And you just not purposely for relaxing, but it used to take my mind elsewhere for a few seconds. And when you woke up again, I felt so much more relaxed, and it's almost having a shakeout without shaking out, if you know what I mean. You know, mental shakeout.
Huh.
So you could sort of cool yourself down and then just continue, you know.
Right.
So, yeah, I think it's handy doing things like that, you know.
Right. So it sounds like you're pushing your mental side and your physical side both as far as you could do. Which one was more rewarding? Which one sort of felt more intriguing to you?
If I was fit, then it would be the mental side.
Right.
And if I wasn't so fit, it used to be panic stations, and I knew that was what it would be. So there wasn't like a really yes or no thing, you know what I mean? Because the way we went through climbing was to my way it was to make sure I was physically good enough for the route. You know what I mean? I wouldn't go on for instance, an E5 or something if I was climbing E3. You know, I thought I was bad at people to do that because, you know, they're putting themselves in danger and everybody else. And I used to have an attitude, if you're not suited for the route, leave it for another day. So as you answer your question, when you were climbing, you know, I never ever really came apart. I always, the only times I didn't get up things in the lakes and places like that straight away or first time was because of the condition of them. If you got up and it was this, or wet or the grain or something was missing, something that broke off, stuff like that, you know. I mean, it's talking about that. When I done on Pave York, there's a route called Sixpence, sort of like E6, 6B or something.
Yes. Yeah.
And I was probably doing the second second ascent, or as somebody once said, probably the first ascent.
But, whose name is underneath it?
Not mine. I must say, not mine. But I was climbing with a lad called Peter Curtin, and then you climbed up to about until you got to the break. There's a break runs across it, Hawthorne or something like that. But anyway, just below that break, somebody put an in situ wire in, which sort of stopped you putting a wire in, which really put me off in situ gear of that nature, you know, because you couldn't get your wire in because their wire was in. But I had one below it, which was a bit iffy, and I went up the top groove, and it was wet. And I got right above Hawthorne. I put this friend in, this rigid friend in, because there was a peg there. Put the rigid friend in, and then clipped the peg, and I slipped out of the groove, and that's the top groove. And I shot down. The friend popped out. The peg snapped. The in situ runner snapped, and I was on something like a rock 4. That was between me and death. The rock 4. And the lad I was climbing with, Peter Curtin, my feet were sort of here.
Uh-huh.
So, and that was as close to death as I'd ever been. You know what I mean? And
wow.
After that sort of, I mean, I went back with John Earl and done it, but I'll tell you, it was the first time in the lakes I abseiled down that top groove to make sure it was dry. You know,
right?
Didn't stop, didn't practice the moves, didn't check the gear. I knew the peg was gone. I just abseiled straight down. The top groove was dry, done it straight away.
Right.
But I knew I had to go back and do it. You know what I mean? Otherwise, all my confidence and everything I'd built up would have not went down the pan, but it wouldn't have been good.
Right.
So that was a scary experience.
So that brings in something based on what you just said. If you are approaching climbs and this ground up on site, it's a very honest style, isn't it?
Yeah.
But then if other people are doing things in a less honest style, it changes the nature of the challenge, doesn't it? Because because somebody might go and do a new route and say, oh, this route is so and so a grade.
Yeah.
So there's the challenge, but it's not an honest challenge. So it kind of puts people's lives at risk, doesn't it? And that's nature of climbing.
There's a few things I used to really hate about climbing. One was people putting in situ wires, not because they were stuck, putting them in before they'd done them, and then leaving them in. So they deteriorate. So when you get up there, like on that one on Sixpence, you get there and you can't do anything about it. You're on site and you can't do anything about this thing, you know. And the other thing I quickly learned, I mean, obviously I didn't get up every single route, you know. First time. Most of them I did. I mean, you know, sort of like Das Capital, I had to go back and do the top pitch, couldn't even find it. You know, it was that dirty with John. But I mean, things like that, if a grade was, say, like, just for a number, say if it was E4, and you'd be climbing an E4 and you'd do it, that would be great. And if you went on another E4 and you found it desperate, but it was really an E5, that's when you found out it'd been abseiled down, cleaned off. There was a sneaky little number 3 friend round the corner that you would never see, or a rock basement on the left, or the hidden handhold. And they hadn't really divulged that in the guidebook or anywhere else. So you'd be going up thinking you were doing an E4 and it'd be an E5, or an E5 would be an E6 or something, you know. And I used to think that's why I didn't like people that used to clean them all. You know, obviously if we're doing new routes and you know, I don't know, Dove Crag or something, you know, you clean off the route at Dove because it needed the loose rock taken off and all the rest of it. But then say, oh, it's only E4 because you have all that knowledge. When it's really E5.
This brings up a little thing I was going to talk about. So you're up in Northumberland, you guys are Northumberland, and I think this is more a thing of that era where each region had its sort of crew. I mean, it was very regional back then, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The way information's everywhere now, so those sort of things break down a lot. So there would have been a Peak scene, a Yorkshire scene, Northumberland, Scottish, Lakes.
Yeah, for sure.
And what was the interaction between them all? Because I almost imagine there was a sort of some competitiveness going on between different scenes. Was there? Was that true?
There was only really the one scene up there I was in Northumberland, and that was like us. You know, I mean, like you say, you got the Scotch lads coming down, but they're a nice bunch of lads, you know. So the competitiveness didn't do a lot of routes in Northumberland anyway, but they were more into bouldering. So it didn't really work with them. But amongst our scene, to be honest with you, it wasn't competitive at all. It was just good fun. There was no like anybody at the top of the tree. We never had he's a better climber than him or he's worse than him attitude. You know, it was really.
You're just saying that because you're the best, Bob.
No. I mean, no. It was just because that's just the way we were. You know.
Right. Yeah.
You know, everybody tried everything, and you know, some routes you lose to other people, and that was the price of it. You know. You know, I didn't mind at all if John Earl done a route or Steve Blake done a route or my brother done a route or Ian Kyle done a route. It didn't matter. It was just part of the team. You know, what I didn't like was somebody from outside coming in and doing a route. That used to really
Did that ever happen? Because they were your routes.
Oh, yeah. Well, people like Cubby and that came and done stuff. You know what I mean? County ethics and stuff like that. Where when he done that the first time, he put a place runner in. You know. So that was like the big sin, but that's why it's called county ethics. You know, we had a word with him said, where, I mean, I hadn't done anything on the route. I says, but if you're putting pre-placed runners in, you've obviously cleaned it, practiced the moves and all that, and that sort of said, well, I'll do the same. And I knew I'd get up if I'd done the same, you know. So do it properly. Really, you know, Cubby's a great lad, so he just went back and fair enough, and done it was supposed to be done, you know.
Right.
So good, you know.
But did you have a sense of who the Yorkshire climbers were and peak climbers and lakes, or was there such a thing? Was there like sort of equivalent of your group in other areas?
Do you mean did they come into our area? Or did they
I'm just interested in the sort of the regional sort of scenes in each place.
Yeah.
And were they all very distinct? Is that the way it was? Like distinct?
Yeah, well, groups? You had the Yorkshire squad. No, Lakes of the Lakes, you had the Lakes lads, then you had the Barrow lads, you know. Scotland, you had the Glaswegians, and then the lads from Edinburgh, you know. I mean, they all come down at one stage or another, you know. I think,
right.
You know, I mean, to be honest with you, I think our squad done more damage in their area, doing their routes than they did in ours, you know.
Nice.
You know, that was my attitude. It's like we'll come and do all your hardest routes, which we did.
What was your best away wins then, Bob?
Well, it's Fated Path probably in Scotland.
E76B.
Yeah, I think it's something like 8A now. You know, 7C plus on, and that's got bolts in. I think it had 2 pegs and three bolts. I think it had in. You know, it's. You know, I mean, obviously in the peak we're doing, you know, in the Peak District we're doing
Fated Path and Craig of Anchor. I'm saying Fated Path is one of the first bolted climbs in Scotland. Was it Graham Livingstone or Cubby put it up?
Livingstone, He done Fated Path. He was the first one to bolt the mountain crags, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty sparse. I think it was 3 bolts in it or something. A couple of wires and stuff like that, you know.
And you repeated that?
Yeah, it was on site. Yeah, so... You know, probably the first on site it had, you know, at the time. You know.
And was that you know, did you sort of go and do that and then sort of say, hey, I've just done, was that was that part of the crack?
No. I mean, no, I never we just used to do our thing and leave. A lot of the time there was people there when I'd done that, obviously Scotch lads and all sorts of people. But,
right.
You know, a lot of the time, you know, people didn't bother. I mean, we used to go down the peak and done the prow and all these sort of things way back when. You know, and load the flies and all these things. And we just used to move around doing. I used to go to the crag and basically hunt out the hardest routes on the crag at the time. You know, you know, I mean, there was a few people operating the same. You know, obviously, I'm not talking about Force and that who was moving all over the world. I mean, you know, Jerry Peel and people like that, Dougie Hall. You know, they were doing exactly the same as me, but from different areas. You know, they would turn up on the crag and have the exact same attitude as me, you know. And when you met the lads, we used to have, you know, great patter, really good banter, so winding each other up, you know.
Right.
Because they were doing the same as me. We all, I mean, it wasn't just them, you know, there's people like Pete Williams and stuff like this, you know, and, you know, loads of them really, you know, trying it, you know. But, yeah, it was.
Were these all the best climbers, in your opinion, the people you've just mentioned?
Yeah, I think we're probably up on the top, you know. There's probably a band... in each area, you probably got three or four people, or two teams. You know what I mean? two teams that would be the best in Scotland,
Right.
best in the peak, best everywhere, I mean, you had people like Pat Littlejohn who used to run right down there, didn't he?
Yeah.
People just didn't go down and do his stuff. I think the bloke was doing loads of stuff, and at the time he was trying to get himself known in the magazines. And no, you don't. You just get a mention, which is terrible, really, for what he done.
Yeah. Well, I think everyone acknowledges what he did was pretty amazing, don't they?
Yeah. I mean,
so back to Northumberland, Bob. Give us what are the sort of the best, in your opinion, what are the best climbs in Northumberland? Tell us about a handful of the sort of the most special climbs up there, in your opinion.
Oh, the best ones in Northumberland. I just have to mention my own, wouldn't I? I think if you go to, you put one on every crag, obviously. If you go to Bagabowden, if you're climbing the things like the Saucer and stuff like that, really good climbs, powerful at the bottom, and then nice and sort of slabby at the top. You got stuff like that. And obviously, if you want to do the harder ones, you got the Merlin. But I don't think anybody can actually. Well, I certainly couldn't say this is the best climber here, because you got things like Coldstream Corner, Kailua Out the Woods, which is absolutely fantastic. It's sort of hard VS, you know what I mean? It's absolutely brilliant climb, And then you on the same crag, you've got Australia Crack, which at that grade is probably one of the hardest routes in Northumberland still, I mean, right. I think when Bob Hutchison and John Earl doing Australia Crack, I personally reckon it was harder than anything else in the country at the time.
Right.
Really. It's that hard. So, considering you had EBs on, you didn't have choke, you know what I mean? Then there was no choke there. I mean, even now, it's, I've been there when there's been good climbers. I won't mention their name. Very good climbers came up and tried it. Apart from my brother telling them the information on it, which he was terrible at, they just struggled like that. They just never got up them, So, I mean, that was done years ago, So, you've got stuff all over the place, I wouldn't like to say one best route, I mean, 6. I mean, Northumberland's got hundreds of classics, there's just so many. Any one crag you could think of 10 classic routes on,
Yeah. And I think there's still development going on too, isn't there?
Oh yeah. Not big routes, but we're still. I mean, there's me, Martin Wolf, Alec Burns, and Stevie Blake. We're still going around doing new stuff all the time, just constantly. I mean, to be honest with you, before COVID, that we were doing probably 1 or 2 new problems every time we went out,
Right. I was last year. I went to places like Hepburn Woods.
Oh, Heaven, yeah.
Jeez, the rock is just amazing.
It's amazing, yeah. The more you get into that forest, the more there is,
It's just beautiful. It's just world class rock. It's just not been discovered before.
Yeah, there's lots of places like that,
And you're still searching these places out?
Yeah. I mean, there's still stuff in the woods,
Yeah.
Some of them you've got to wait to cut the trees down, because there's a couple of them good lumps of rock, but they've got, huge sort of pine trees up against them,
Yeah.
And also in Northumberland, we started stabilising things using stabiliser,
right?
Which would turn what was an iffy boulder, a bit sandy, not really. Is it worth doing? Is it not worth doing? Into a good problem, So we started doing that, It's, the places like Killally and stuff, there's places all over where you can find rock anywhere if you're really keen to look for it, So,
yeah, but this isn't just rock anywhere. This is beautiful rock. These things,
yeah,
just amazing. And there's that stuff. There's stuff that Dan Varian does. Do you know all that stuff?
Well, I know the stuff. Most of the stuff Dan does, but I mean, what Dan does now is out of most people in the country's league. You know what I mean?
Totally, isn't it?
Oh, it is. I mean, I've climbed. I've bowled at 7C, and I've climbed 8 years. And when I look at Dan's stuff, I still shake my head. I really can't say how you can even hold them, how you start them, And I've seen him climbing, and the bloke's a bloody wizard,
Just amazing, isn't it?
Oh yes, he's absolutely stunning, He sits on the ground, he'd be squatting or standing, It's almost like levitation, you know.
Right.
You know.
And that drive to explore too is real sort of mega exploratory thing. Have you seen that stuff he does up in Christianbury? Do you know Christianbury?
Yeah, in the valley, that gully thing.
Bloody hell.
I've never been to the crowd, but he's done a slideshow and he had them on there, and I've seen lots of other things that he's posted up and that.
Right.
He's got them all over the place. Even the rail at Bowden Doors. I think he gave it
8A plus or something, or 8B plus was it?
Oh, right. I'd like to see the man that does the second descent of that.
Right.
It took Dan quite a while, and the conditions have just got to be perfect. And when you look at the rail, it's like so futuristic. It really is. You just think, well, no. That's all you can say. No, somebody claimed that. No, they didn't. They're just kidding you. They've made it up. The holes are tiny in that. They're open like scallops and they're sloping downwards.
Right.
And there's no footholds.
So Bob, when you see stuff like that, are you envious? Are you jealous? Or are you sort of full of admiration? Or what? Somebody who's there, because that was you back in the day. How's it feel now, looking at the sort of this thing going on now? That's sort of your thing, but multiplied by whatever.
Yeah, it's absolutely great. I knew the writing was on the wall, to be honest with you. When I was playing with Andrew Earl, who I sort of I passed my sell-by date for hard roller problems and climbing. And then Andy Earl came along, started doing the prayer and all these things. And he just, when I was watching Andy, I thought, this is a whole different ball game, you know what I mean? It's a whole different level of climbing to me.
He just flew through the air, didn't he? Andy just flew through the air.
He was so good. He climbed with panache as well, you know what I mean? It wasn't just grab and snatch, you know what I mean? He had like spirit in him, you know what I mean? It's as if he was alive inside. Apart from like alive inside, like we are like a fizz bomb he was, really.
What do you mean?
Well, he was like really stylish with, he could pop for something. You couldn't see how he'd popped. You know what I mean? To most people it's like a jump or a lurch or a dive. When it just used to, it's so bloody smooth the bugger was.
Right. But just energy came from nowhere.
Yeah, but he didn't look like a climber neither. He was strong and muscly enough, but he just didn't look like a climber.
What do you mean?
Well, he didn't have that sort of mass. He did have the wedge when he used to get on the like 8Bs and that. It killed him. He used to change shape. You know what I mean? He's like a shape shifter. But when he was bouldering, they were short. Most of them were short blasts. So you didn't see his muscles expanding. You know what I mean? The oxygen in the blood wasn't in there. The oxygen wasn't in the blood there. So you didn't see it, Whereas if you see somebody on, North Wall of Kilmsey or something, you can see them changing shape, can't you? They stand at the bottom, they look like Joe Bloggs, and by the time they get to the top, they're like the Hulk, the build-up of the body, the pressure, And I didn't see that much in Andrew, but his ability was fantastic, great stuff, And Dan's exactly the same, Dan's just another version of that,
Right.
So I knew things like Dan was on the way. That's why I love it. It's just another step, And that's,
So sorry, just to go back, Bob. How would you describe your own climbing? You've described those guys. What did you feel your climbing was like as a climber?
Style-wise, Well, I've always been more technical than brawny, but I could do brawn. I was very good at laybacking. It'd get me feet really high, sort of kind of like next to your hands and stuff. And I was very, very good at rocking over.
Right.
I could get something at the same level as my hands and put my foot on it and roll it over. It only needed to be about 6 inches away from my right hand, and I could get my toe on it and just roll it and just lock it in a really cramped position,
Yeah.
And that was great fun when I used to boulder with Peter Curtin, because he was way stronger than me. He's probably stronger than, well, he was probably the strongest climber in Britain at the time, boulderer.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, but I'm glad you brought him up.
Yeah,
he's one of these people you almost feel is acknowledged as one of the sort of instigators of bouldering, not quite like a John Gill type thing, but sort of like a whiff of John Gill about him, because he was more dedicated to that sort of lower, shorter thing whenever that wasn't the thing that people did.
One one of the routes he'd done, I think it's called Harry Potter now. He'd done it back about
Back
Bowden on the roof. And he was so strong. I mean, it probably doesn't seem so strong now, but then he was out there and he was this two, like a lip thing, and he got this one hand sort of like above his head and behind his head, and the other hand was like waist height, and his feet came off, but he didn't move. he didn't fall, and he was in the front lever position, you know, and he just sort of levitated there, and me and John were going, bloody hell, I don't believe that. But then he continued to do it, you know. So his strength was sort of really, really good, you know. And he was quite, he was technical, but only in a brutal way, if that makes any sense.
Right.
You know, he wasn't technical like on a leaning wall of, you know, what we used to call foot faggotry, you know, where you had to change feet and step through and do little nifty things. But you could do something like the Pockets Traverse, and, you know, it required a massive amount of technique and strength, but it was just bungled into brutality, you know.
Right, yeah.
He was very good at that. So obviously places like Kylo in the Woods, he was in his element, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it there. But we used to have great laughs there, you know what I mean? He would do something brutally, and I would do it without the brutalness. And he used to start saying, well, oh, you can't use that foot hold. Or you can't use that hand tool. You can't do this. You've got, even though it being an independent problem from everything else.
Right, yeah.
Know, he had his rules at how you do it. Oh no, you can't use your right foot before your left foot. Stuff like this. It was great fun. And I suppose that type of training was really good at building up to what I became, or in some respects what Jerry Moffat became.
Yeah, well, Jerry Moffat climbed with him a lot. I was involved in the Jerry Moffat book, and he talked about going to the Bowderstone.
Bowderstone and that, yeah. I mean,
they developed the Bowderstone.
Incredible things there, you know. I mean, he was a lovely lad as well. That was the thing, you know. He was a really.
I met him years ago. Like, sort of quite a gentle guy.
Yeah, very good, quiet and gentle. Yeah, but underneath there was a load of cheek and power. You know what I mean? He could be as lippy as he wanted. Once he got to know you, he was quite abusive and, you know, lippy, which was great because it just fired you up to want to do more. You know what I mean? Get your revenge. So, you know, and I'm sure Jerry Moffat got the same grip of him. You know.
Sure. Yeah, you sound like they got on really well together and sort of sparked off each other.
Yeah, well, that's the way to get better, isn't it? So, You know, shadow boxing is no good. You need somebody to box with, don't you?
Yeah, you need a punch in the chin every now and
again.
You
need to be woken up. And Peter used to wake you up. If he didn't knock you out, he'd wake you up.
Well, looking back, what's the best you've ever climbed? What was your best ever? When were you at your best? What was your doing the best stuff for you?
The best periods, probably 78 up to 88, 90, somewhere like that.
That's a long time.
Yeah, well, but 10 or 12 years, you know. Yeah, I can't claim. But I still, you know, 20 years ago, I mean, I was still claiming sort of like 7 season stuff.
Right. What was the hardest thing you did?
I don't know. Depends how you feel that.
However you view it.
Yeah. Well, I really, like I said before about routes, I'm not sure what a really hard route is, because a really hard route, if you're as fit as the really hard route, then it's sort of like not a challenge, because you're fitter than the route, you know. But you know, I think sometimes it's even years ago when you've done stuff like dry grasping that and Right Wall, Lord of the Flies, or Pishney Bull and Verdun and stuff like that. When you do them things, if you're kind of up for the job and fit enough for it, then that's the buzz, isn't it? You know, that's really where it's at, isn't it? You know, I mean, I did go to Malham, you know, for a few years with John, and we're doing hard things there, but you ended up red pointing them, you know, time after time practicing. I mean, when you live in Northumberland, it was hard to do. You know, you only got one day there, and then you had to come back home. There was nothing to train on up here. So even though I've done loads of hard routes at Malham, I don't class them as hard routes done at Malham. Right. Because I sort of like dragged them down to a standard that I could do them.
Yeah.
which which to me felt really bad, and it still feels bad that I even done that. But I had to do that to get that sort of level of fitness up for limestone climbing, But having said that, when you watch the best lads, Magos and Andre and stuff like that, they're now on-sighting. They're trying to get back to on-sighting again. You know what I mean? At a very high standard. So it's all went round in circles,
Yeah.
So you could say the people in the middle that played the game in the middle, that sort of done, I don't know, 8 years of early 8 years. They were probably only climbing 7B plus, but were doing early 8 years, So climbing's funny. It's good the way it is now because you've got the top men who's doing them really good. Whereas when we were younger, you had people doing good stuff, but they weren't the top men. You know what I mean?
I know.
They weren't the best. The best climbers to me were people that weren't red pointing, they weren't abseiling down and cleaning them off, and spend 20 days on them. It's some of the ones at Malham, the early ones, were on for. Oh, I've only been on it 20 times, or a red pointed that. How many times did you red? How many goes have you had it? Or 18, 12, 14.
Yeah.
You just think that's not really climbing, is it? To me it wasn't. And I was kind of pleased when I came away from it. I understand that's where you get the fitness from, and you don't get it anywhere else by doing that. But I mean, if somebody else that's living in the area, some of the best climbers, you pull a hat out the say like we were talking before, say like Jerry Peel or somebody. If he'd went to Malham and spent ages top roping something or cleaning something, or Dougie Hall done the same, or that type of on-site climber, they would have been doing the 8 years and 8Bs then. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They didn't have the inclination to spend all that time doing it,
So, Bob, now you're 70? Is that right? 70?
Yeah, 70 now, yeah.
Where's climbing at for you?
Oh, it's still going up. Yeah, definitely. Apart from COVID, I normally get 2 or 3 trips abroad a year. So, you could be anywhere, really. You could, Barcelona area, I know quite a few lads over that neck of the woods in Spain and that, you get down to Malaga and El Chorro and stuff like that, we still move around, still climb well. I mean, I'm still climbing sort of like 7A pluses, stuff like that. But that's on sighting them. If I spend time on things, if I spend time on things, I could probably still do 7B plus, without much doubt, really, to be honest with you. But when we go away on trips, we just on site all the time. Do 68 routes in a day. Anything from 6A plus to 7A plus, and do 6 in a day, and have a big smile on your face, have a few beers,
It still makes you smile as much as ever.
Oh, it does, certainly does. Yeah, I love it. Yeah. I love the training that goes with it, the discipline of training to keep fit, for climbing, It's all sort of like rathered up together, isn't it, the training? If you're not up to do the training, you're not going to get up the routes that you want to get up. So you've got to do the training. And training and climbing is great because it's not like playing with Newcastle United or some poor football team where you've got to play as a team. You're just a one-man band, aren't you? You play your own game,
Sure.
Yeah. All good stuff.
All good stuff. Amazing, Bob. There we go.
So we're done?
Are we?
I don't know. I can talk forever as long as the subject's right.
Tell us a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I've loved that sort of the gang that you guys had, and the sort of the vibe I've always got off is kind of everything climbing should be sort of pushing yourself to your minute maximum and enjoying every minute of it, sort of thing. So, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, you know yourself. I mean, the climbing in this country at the moment, it's bouldering, isn't it? 90% of the climbing now is bouldering.
Right.
But unless you're doing new boulder problems, you're not really moving the bouldering on, are you? You know what I mean? It's just having fun, having a good day. And that's what it's supposed to be about. You know what I mean? Have fun, have a good day, have a laugh. But if you can squeeze a new one in, well, that's the icing on the cake, isn't it?
I know. Yeah. What's the last new one you've done?
Well, I can't tell you because they're secret crags.
Oh, God.
The last one I done was probably 7 A plus, last boiler problem.
Right.
So, and that's in Crag X.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Which is
it.
kinda like-
Yeah. Well, there's so many people know. There's a lot of people in Northumberland have an inkling, apart from me, Stevie, and Marty, and Alec, have an inkling where things are, but we just don't let them know. Just don't tell them. Otherwise,
No.
you're going to have Gavin Ellis and people creeping up on it.
You bastards.
Can't have that. Yeah.
Amazing, Bob. Thanks a million for your time.
Yeah,
Thanks a
no
million
bother.
for your chat. It's been a real honour to sort of have a bit of a yak.
Yeah, well, I hope you understood the Geordie all right.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Took me a while, but I got there.
Got there. Okay. Catch you. See you later then.
Thanks a million.
Niall,
Cheers, Bob.
Niall. Okay.
Yes,
See you later.
Niall.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.